The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Granpeesheh and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. I'm Shannon Penrod, and as you can see, I'm being joined virtually by Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Good morning, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Good morning, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here.
I think, we're changing up a couple of things here, and you guys just heard the disclaimer that was run at the beginning of the show that was done by a guest voiceover artist for us, one of our favorite, and I'm thinking all these years I've been saying your name wrong.
My name?
Yes. How do you say your name?
My Granpeesheh.
So maybe I'm not hitting the P enough. Granpeesheh. Because that's how he says it.
As opposed to Granpeesheh? Yeah.
I think so.
Because the voice is Sonny's voice, my son. Is that what it is?
Yes, it is.
I love it.
It is. And he's got a great voice. Cartoon Network needs to swoop him up.
Well, you and your lovely husband are the ones that taught him how to start voice acting.
Well, but he has the voice, so that's an amazing. You can't fake that. Can't teach that either. So anyway, Dr. Granpeesheh is here with us, and she's going to be answering your questions live during this next hour. She's a true expert in the field of autism. She's been working in this field for over 45 years. Which is a strange thing to say, because look at her. She looks like Gidget on the beach. She looks so cute. But yes, she's been working with individuals for over 45 years, from very young babies up through senior citizens of all different levels of abilities. And she's a true champion for individuals on the autism spectrum. From the beginning of time, asking for people to respect their rights. One of my favorite things that she says is it has to be fair. If you're going to be working with an individual on the spectrum, that it has to be fair. I try to live by that because that's what she taught me. She's done so many things for so many people. And I always say, specifically for my family, I don't know where my family would be without her wonderful guidance. So I'm so thrilled that we get to spend this hour with all of you, and you have the opportunity to pick her beautiful brain. Now, we do give the disclaimer that she cannot give individual specific advice in this format because she has not had an opportunity to meet the individual, to see what's going on, to interview you at length, whether you are this person on the spectrum or the person who loves the person on the spectrum. But what she can do is ask some more questions of you and hopefully give you a direction to go so that when the experts who actually have eyes on the situation, you'll be better prepared, have better questions, and be able to move faster and more elegantly because you had the right questions based on what she said. So if you like that, we hope that you will write in right now. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and about a dozen other sites. We're saying already good morning to Liliana. I also want to say, too, that if you haven't checked out her website, DoreenGranpeesheh.com, I want to encourage you to go there, and that we have started taking questions for this show through the contact form. So if you go to the website, there's so much to look at, but you can hit contact, and there is a place for you to put your name and your question, all of that in, and that's where we're going to start to take questions ahead of time for the show. So that's DoreenGranpeesheh.com, and as Traven is reminding us, you can check her out on Ask Dr. Doreen on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram, all of those wonderful places. So good morning, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Good morning, Shannon. And I was just typing to Traven that somebody wrote in and said the volume is a little bit down. So please let us know if you can hear us. If you can't, we will work on that.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing that. Hello, good morning, Bonnie. And we're saying hello to somebody whose name is Family Physician. We're going to get to your questions, but we do have an overriding topic for today, but we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but we're going to start out today talking about extinction. And I was just saying to Dr. Granpeesheh, I think that this is one of the most misunderstood and hardest concepts, especially for parents to understand, that I'm 17 years in and I feel like I'm just starting to get a grasp on what extinction is and what it isn't, and how to use it and when not to use it, so on and so forth. So we have a couple of questions that have come in recently about that I thought had dealt with extinction. So this first one, my 5-year-old has ASD diagnosis and some language. He regularly hits me in the face, no one else. Our team has told me that he is doing this for my attention and has asked that we put it, quote, on extinction, which I guess means that I'm not supposed to react if he hits me. I'm having a terrible time. I have been hit so many times in the last 24 hours. It hurts. How am I not supposed to respond? It clearly isn't working. I feel betrayed, alone, and like a bad mom. Please help me stop the hitting. And first of all, I'm sending this parent a hug, because this is hard stuff. Being hit by your child is very hard.
And being told to put it on extinction, I think, is even harder. And honestly, I would not recommend putting it on extinction. Whenever it involves hitting or injury to someone, extinction is not the way to go. In this case, hitting, you would block. You would block and do partial extinction. So in other words, as the child is trying to hit you, you would protect your face, make sure that you block, but you don't engage with the child. You don't interact. You do something else. You protect your face, and you go on as if nothing happened.
So no lecture, no reprimand, no lecture for it. That part we don't react to.
That's very important. Yeah. So if you don't mind, Shannon, I kind of want to go back and just like define extinction first.
Let's do that.
Yeah. So, we start out with in ABA, we generally say that every behavior will increase. The whole concept of behavioral psychology has to do with the fact that a behavior will increase if it is followed by a reinforcer. That premise comes from a portion of psychology called operant conditioning. And operant conditioning essentially says any behavior that is followed by a reward or reinforcer is going to increase. Okay, so that's really important to remember as we're talking about extinction. Now, you have to realize that when we talk about reward or reinforcer, these are not necessarily the things that people think are just like they're not the traditional rewards, right? Like we talk about rewards like I don't know, maybe a good job, that's a reward, or maybe, hey, I'm going to buy you a toy, or I'm going to buy you a cookie, or whatever it is. All of those are rewards, they are reinforcers, but there are lots of other things that are also reinforcers that a parent might not think of. For example, if you're placing a demand on a child, if you're saying, I need you to clean up your room, and then they hit or they do any kind of behavior, like they scream or they complain or whatever, and you back off, you backing off is a reward. So what we refer to here is removal of a demand, getting rid of something that was required of the individual to do, something that they didn't want to do. So removal of a unpleasant task, let's put it that way, is a reward. Access to an object that they might want is a reward. Like if a child comes and bangs on a glass door, and you think, oh my gosh, he wants to go out, and you immediately go and open the door, the child learns that banging on the glass is effective. That behavior will increase because they are going to get the reward they wanted, which is access to the outside. Attention is a reward. So for example, if you are like the child is just crying and you go over and you hold them and nobody can really figure out why the child is crying and you're holding them, crying will increase. It will become an effective form of communication. And the example you just gave, Shannon, which is like kind of bartering or negotiating is rewarding. So let's say you're in a supermarket and the child says, I want that toy or candy or whatever, and they have a complete tantrum and you're embarrassed and you're like, oh, I want to just stop this. You give them that candy, you have just rewarded the tantrum and the arguing and all that sort of stuff. So all of these things are rewards that are happening in our day-to-day lives. When we talk about extinction, and this is what's hard with extinction, is that the goal is, first you have to figure out what was the child trying to communicate with that challenging behavior. So whatever they were trying to gain out of that challenging behavior is the reward, and that's the thing you don't want to give. So for example, the child is, hitting the glass because they want to go outside. You want to make sure you do not let them go outside. So you are ignoring the specific challenging behavior. And that is what extinction is. You ignore that specific behavior because you're trying to make sure the child understands that that specific challenging behavior is not an effective form of communication. And what you try to do is you're trying to replace that with something more adaptive, some form of communication, whether it's touching an icon or giving you an icon or typing or requesting vocally. So, and those are the ones you want to reward, not the ones that are challenging. So it's very, very hard when someone tells you not to give attention, because a lot of times when someone smacks you in the face, they're trying to get your attention. And it's really hard to not give attention to that because you're getting hurt. So really, in this case, what you're doing is you're going to block it because we don't want you to get hurt. And you're just going to make sure that you don't attend to the child at that time. So you're going to block it and just engage in something else. Pretend like you're busy. Pick up a magazine, start reading it. Walk over to the sink and wash your hands. Talk to someone else. Ignore the child during that tantrum, but protect yourself. That's super important. The other thing,
yes,
sorry,
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to talk about the burst, but I can wait.
Well, I just wanted to say, I think one of the things that I've been learning over the years that as parents, that the nuance to this that we miss is that, so we're not going to let them, the thing that the child is seeking, we're not going to let them, with the challenging behavior, we're not going to let them have it. But the really critical piece is that outside of this bubble of behavior, that we're going to be able to teach them a way to appropriately get that thing. And I think that's the thing that we as parents miss. And then often people go, well, if if we're trying to teach our child to communicate and all behavior is communication, then why aren't you giving them the reward for it? You are doing that, but in a teaching moment that's outside this challenging behavior moment. So I just wanted to say that, because I think I missed that for years, that part.
No, that, and also, yes, you have to practice those forms of communication separately, the appropriate ones, but you also want to make sure that you use those other more appropriate forms of communication when the behavior occurs. So somebody had the question, my son squeezes hands of his para teachers or our hands when he gets frustrated and he cannot verbalize it. He has limited speech. Now, this is a really, really good example where parents will try to completely ignore the child when they're squeezing your hand, for example. That is not what I'm saying here. It's very, very important to find out what he's frustrated. That's great. We know he's frustrated. But if he could speak, what would he be saying? Would he be asking for an object? Would he be asking to get out of a situation? What is causing his frustration? This is key because that's the thing we want to teach him to communicate. It doesn't have to be vocal communication. Instead of squeezing, he could give the teacher an icon, a little piece of paper with a picture on it that says what it is that he actually wants. But it is important to find out what the frustration is, because it's going to be different in different situations. Like he might be frustrated because He doesn't want to do the work they're giving him. He might be frustrated because he doesn't want to go for a walk. I don't know. It's important to first figure out what the all challenging behavior, by the way, you guys, is from frustration. All of it is communication that the child can't otherwise communicate. So it's all about just trying to communicate their frustration. But the question is, what is causing their frustration? That's what we call a functional assessment. And that's really important. So here we go. Can I keep going with this track?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead.
The parent 2008 RA.
Her name is Bonnie.
Oh, that's Bonnie. Okay.
Yeah.
Bonnie wrote and said, he does it in school when he doesn't, I assume, want to do his work at school. Okay, so this is really a fabulous situation here, Bonnie, because we don't really want to teach him a behavior that allows him to just get out of schoolwork, right? Because ultimately he's there and he needs to have schoolwork and do schoolwork. But we need to do two things here. First, we need to have him communicate using a more appropriate method than squeezing someone's hand. Second, we need to make the situation fair, as I always say, right? So clearly he's trying to, maybe he needs more breaks. Maybe he needs accommodation so that the work is easier. And maybe in between he needs more rewards. Whenever a child is trying to get out of a situation, that basically tells you that the situation is a little too demanding. And there's lots of ways to make it less demanding and more rewarding, right? So you can give breaks, you can make the actual content a little easier, you can model and prompt, and you can frequently reward and reinforce. So what you do in this case, Bonnie, is you have the teacher or the para actually, every time he squeezes, and also separate from when this happens, they will teach him that a particular icon, like a picture exchange communication icon, like PECs. Every child is different, by the way, as well. He could be taught using PECs. He could be taught using typing. If he vocalizes, they could teach him some vocalization. But he needs a more appropriate way to communicate. This is hard, or I need a break. And those are going to be different things. So for instance, you should just make the lesson, you should talk to them and say, we need the lessons to be a little bit easier and we need more reinforcers and more breaks. So what they do is he would then be taught to request a break every, 5 minutes or whatever it is that he can handle. And then he would get a short break and he would come back and he would continue, but the material would be easier. And by the way, the biggest way to get a child to not avoid material or work is to make the work more fun and more reinforcing. So that is something they all need to do, is they just need to make it easier, shorter, and more fun. And then you also, when he does the squeezing, need to also give him the card and he will request either a break or whatever it is he wants. But then the giving the card, as long as it's easier than squeezing and as long as it's more effective than squeezing. In other words, every time he gives you a little icon, you actually do give him a break. But when he squeezes, you continue working. And that's really important.
Fantastic. Judy just wrote in and said, here's a great question. I have a teen nonverbal boy that is trying to tell me, or what is he trying to tell me by obsessive princess, very low average, loves baby toys, videos, etc. Trying to redirect is extremely hard and blocking. Everything is not going well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I understand exactly the obsessive princess.
Very low average. Yeah. It loves baby toys, videos, etc. Trying to redirect is extremely hard and blocking. Yes, it is. Let me just comment on that really fast, Judy. It is not easy when you have, especially if it's a teen, because we're talking about over 10 years of having learned that challenging behavior is communicative, is effective. So now changing that is very, very hard to do because for years and years, he's gotten what he wants by having challenging behaviors, possibly by hitting. And now he's bigger. And now he's able to really get away with it. I don't think any parent alone can handle a teen who has, any kind of hitting or aggressive behavior. I don't think that's to be expected of you. I think that you need help. And a lot of times what happens, Shannon, sadly, is that by the time the child is a teen, and if they are aggressive, the only people left to deal with it are the parents. A lot of times schools won't deal with it. They'll just send the child home. Agencies are stopping taking aggressive and teen children. It's really, really difficult, and it just lands on the parent, and that's not fair by any means. So, and then of course, when that happens, the parent is so exhausted, overwhelmed, and probably scared of getting hurt that they just give in, right? And it's a cycle that gets worse because the individual then learns this is effective. But I'm not blaming the parent by any means, because if it was me, I'd give in, right? If it's a teenager who's hitting you, you give in. So I really want you to, Judy, to try to find help first. And that could come in different forms. It could be, neighbors who are willing to step in, cousins, family members, friends, your church, anywhere you can, try to get a team together, because training the team is not the hardest thing. You'd be surprised if you get like 4 or 5 people who are able to step in on 2 hours a day, and that's not a lot to ask if you have a big team. And you go and do a training online on how to handle tantrums and how to handle challenging behavior. At least it's, you'll have a group of people helping so that you can actually follow through.
Okay, the question has taken a little bit of a turn while you've been talking, Dr. Granpeesheh, that she clarified that what he wants to do is dress up like a princess. She says, how do you teach he's a boy, not a girl, when they don't get 1 + 1? And she says the team is trying to figure out why. I think this gets into a whole separate area. I think there are a lot of feelings and different ways, perspectives that people take towards this. I do want to say that in the research that we're seeing, there is a higher percentage of people on the spectrum who identify other than the gender that they were identified at as birth. I do want to acknowledge that, and that I guess I, as a parent, want to say to this mom, is there a reason why he can't wear a dress?
Yeah, I know, and it's a touchy, I was going to go there as well, but I was going to start by saying, in general, I think you have to ask yourself which battles you want to actually engage in, which fights, right? Because there's going to be a lot of fights. I understand, Judy, I think what you're saying is that, how can he choose to be a girl or a boy when he doesn't really understand 1 + 1 or other logical things? I think this is not really a battle that you want to fight right now. I don't, it's up to you, obviously, because every family has different cultural beliefs and so on. But I would say it's one of those things that you may not want to engage in right now. If he wants to dress up like a princess, treat it as a reinforcer. It's something that he really wants. As long as he does really good work in other areas for the whole day, allow him to go to his room and dress up like a princess for an hour. Anything that our child engages in or wants to do is, by definition, a reinforcer. And so you can use those things to get the child to do more of other things. So that's kind of my advice, but it does have a lot to do with what's acceptable in your family.
Yes. I guess I do want to say, though, too, that, it's hard because I think earlier when kids are younger, we try to give them more things for them to show their interest in. But regardless of what it is, by the time they're teens, if there's something that they're really drawn to, I think it's important for us as parents to, I think about Temple Grandin, and, she wanted to spin that plate on the end of her bed. And her mom looked at that and said, she's not going to be able to go and do all the things that she wants to do if she just spins the plate. So I'm going to try to broaden her interest and see what else she's interested in. But I'm going to let her do that. As you said, let him go dress up as a princess, because, I would just ask, who is he hurting? I know that there are cultural things, but I think there are things that you can watch, Judy, that might make you to feel better. There's a wonderful film that friends of ours made at Spec Laboratories that's called Boys Don't Wear Dresses. And it's about a boy who's on the spectrum and wants to wear dresses. And I think it's a beautiful film that may help you, and the parent is struggling with it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it would be a great thing for you to watch and see, because it was co-written by a young person on the spectrum that was transitioning and that has now transitioned. So let me know if you would like to watch that, if you're open to that. Let's say that. Okay, I want to move on to some questions, Dr. Granpeesheh, that we've gotten from your website, DoreenGranpeesheh.com, and remind everybody you can be writing in there to send your questions. So Nancy wrote in a question and said, Dr. Granpeesheh, I watched you on WFSB this morning, because you've been doing a lot of press, and I'm reaching out to you for recommendations or suggestions for my 9-year-old autistic granddaughter. She was diagnosed between 1 to 2 years old. It has been a very, very trying on my daughter, who has had autistic teachers come to her house for the last 7 years. The problem is that almost all of these quote-unquote teachers are really not educated enough in the treatment of autism. She is very nonverbal still at 9 years, and only one-word answers, please help.
Yes, so thank you for writing in about that, and this is a difficult situation. I think, when you refer to, teachers coming into the house, I think you might be having behavioral therapists, BTs, behavioral technicians coming in, I assume, because that's pretty much the service that occurs in homes. I think what you definitely want to do is make sure that there's a supervisor overseeing the overall treatment. Supervisors, BTs, depending on the state, behavior technicians are only required by law to have a high school education, as well as around 45 hours of training, which some of it is class time, some of it is practicum. There's an observation and practical training period. It depends on the actual credentials of the BTs. Some BTs are called registered behavior technicians. That means they've definitely passed the exam, which again is still not a lot of training, but it is adequate because they are overseen by a board certified behavior analyst who's either a master's or doctoral level. Now, unfortunately, so that's your supervisor. Your supervisor is either a master's or a doctoral level behavior analyst, BCBA, board certified behavior analyst. And, you need to talk to your daughter and make sure that the company that she's using, who provides these BTs, have a supervisor, and that the supervisor has frequent contact and provides oversight and training for the behavior technicians. Because without the supervision, BTs could be doing basically anything or nothing, and you are wasting time. So I think that's very important to make sure you have adequate supervision. I want to also say, two other thoughts for you to consider. It's a long period of time if she was diagnosed around 2 and she's 9 now, and for many, many years has been getting therapy. So that makes me question if the quality of the therapy was good and if the intensity was high. Because when you start at, let's say, 2 years old or something, you should be doing pretty intensive therapy, like 25, 30, 35, 40 hours a week of therapy through these behavior technicians. So, and generally speaking, you don't go on 7 years without having gained something. So if there isn't significant progress happening, not only would you or the parent would stop, but your payer, your health insurance won't go on without showing adequate progress. So I'm not quite sure what happened there, and you want to make sure you have high quality and a good enough program. Now that she's 9, it's a little different. The program would consist more of the specific skills that she needs, not every skill, but very, very specific, and it'll be very, very difficult to get access to intensive therapy. So at a 9-year-old, you're probably in school, which means she's probably in a special education program. And then maybe you can get something like 2 hours a day after that, which is 10 hours, which isn't bad, honestly, for age 9. But again, the content matters. So like if she has challenging behaviors, they're going to want to deal with that. If she has language deficits, like you mentioned, they're going to want to really focus on language. She might need adaptive skills like, dressing herself, getting ready, feeding herself, whatever those things are. So the content is very important. The supervisor determines that content by analyzing and evaluating your granddaughter. The last comment, though, that I want to make is don't be, just because they're young, don't be biased by that, because some of the BTs, honestly, when they come in, you're like, oh my God, this guy looks like he's 12 years old, but they're actually amazing and they're very talented. And Shannon, I'm sure you have stories about that. I just don't want to underestimate some really, really good and talented BTs that are out there.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked before endlessly about what are good signs of ABA. And I think that one of the good signs about ABA that we've discussed before is that the child is never wrong. And that, if what's being done isn't working, good ABA professionals change it up and do all different kinds of things. And they make it so fun and they make it so fair. I worry that, we all set the bar of where success is in a different area. And it sounds like this 9-year-old granddaughter has some pretty significant challenges and is still nonverbal after all this time. I feel like it would be unconscionable not to mention that not every person on the autism spectrum gets to vocal communication. And that I hope that this grandma understands that that is not going to be everybody's path. But certainly, we would want to see progress in all kinds of different things in order to determine that it's not. Because, it's so hard to explain to somebody the differences between what something what does it actually look like, to pin it down so that somebody could see it without ever having seen it before. But that's why I always go back to your comment about it has to be fair. But it has to be fair and there has to be progress for the individual. So I hope that this grandma gets to that. I want to go to another question that came in on DoreenGranpeesheh.com that Larry said, we're looking for additional support for our neurodivergent son who will be 7 years old at the end of July. He has advanced skills in climbing, jumping, running, and solving puzzles. These make him difficult to contain close to home when his curiosity and sense of adventure spurs wandering. We are working to keep him safe as his safety awareness seems low with respect to road traffic and possibility of getting lost in the wooded areas behind our house. So I'm sure that you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, so, and I think they started out with high functioning, right, Shannon?
Well, he says he has advanced skills in climbing, jumping, running.
Oh, I see those areas.
And he identified as him being neurodivergent.
Got it. So I think, what I'm getting from this is, here's my response, a couple of things. I always tell parents to start with safety first. So if there's a possibility for him to run off in the woods while we're working on teaching him not to do that, let's put some safety measures in place. So the first thing is fence the backyard, like fence your area. I don't care how big or small, fence it in, because I don't even want to talk about, things that have happened when kids run off. So let's fence the area, and hopefully you have the funds. If you don't have the funds, please get in touch with my nonprofit organization, Autism Care Today, because we do actually give funding for fences. So that's one thing. Also, there are other safety steps you could take. For instance, we've talked many times about this. There are GPS devices that now you can attach to the child's clothing, and or obviously if he's 7, maybe you can even put an Apple Watch on him, something that will allow you to track where he is, which is very important first. So that's that. It sounds to me like you have a child who might have some aspects of ADHD, because you're talking about all activities that are very physical and could be a sign of hyperactivity. You might want to have that evaluated, because if he does have an ADHD diagnosis, there are medications that will help him slow down a little bit, not just physically, but also mentally, so that he can receive information from his environment better. People who are hyperactive have a difficulty in receiving information. Like when let's say they read a paragraph and they'll read the first 3 words and then they'll jump to a conclusion. It sounds like he's a pretty active individual, so he could also be having problems with receiving information, because everything that you said to me falls under the category of inhibition. And inhibition, being able to inhibit what we call prepotent responses. So someone is talking and you think you know what they're saying, so you interrupt them. That is actually a symptom of ADHD, is interrupting people. You're in the middle of a sentence or a thought, and another thought comes into your head and interrupts the previous thought. That is a symptom of ADHD. And it all has to do with the inability to inhibit certain things, inhibit behaviors, inhibit thoughts, inhibit, vocalizations or walking or fast-paced activities. Inhibition, when you have those issues, it's one of the executive functions. It's kind of like the portion of the brain that controls our more global behavior, what we call executive functions. One of those is inhibition. Knowing how to slow yourself down, knowing how to self-regulate, knowing how to, not interrupt others. People with inhibition issues will have a lot of problems in day-to-day life, because they will lose objects, they will lose a lot of information that's in their environment, because they're just at a different pace. So the 2 ways to deal with that, one is, as I said, there are medications that help slow individuals down and just help them focus better. But then there is also, you can do a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy, or even applied behavior analysis, focusing just on inhibition. And that means you will, for instance, put the child in situations where normally they would act fast or run off or that sort of thing, or even interrupt, or whether it's a verbal or mental or physical activity where they are not able to inhibit themselves. And you will practice them slowing themselves down. Like, I am not going to be walking out of the room when people are still talking. I am not going to interrupt someone I'm not going to conclude what they want to say until they're finished. So there's a lot of activities and games and things like that you can do to specifically work on inhibition. And I would actually, if I were you, I would actually look that up, because I can give you some samples, but I think you'll probably find a bunch of inhibition activities online which would be able to help you.
I want to go back to a question that came in really early when we started the show from the person who identifies as family physician. They want to know how to deal, and it says bulleting, but I'm guessing that that's a typo and that it's bullying by others for autistic teens like their son. So how do we deal with bullying with teenagers on the spectrum?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for writing that in. I guess I would focus on two things. One is I always say focus on two things, and then I'll give you 10 ideas. But I would that's me not being able to inhibit my thoughts in a pattern. So I'm just thinking that you want to find out what is not causing, but what is it that they're bullying him over. So sometimes kids get bullied. I mean, if he has autism, it's possible that he's just getting bullied because of his autistic traits. If there, and I will talk to you about that in a minute, but if there's specific things, like let's say he's bad at sports, he interrupts the teacher, he doesn't know how to stand in line. If there are specific things where the skill can be taught, work on teaching the skills so that the kids can't make fun of him for not having that skill. So first of all, just work on that aspect. But the more important thing is, I first saw this many years ago at a school district in Maricopa County in Arizona, where parents, a group of moms, had come together and formed a group, and they had started with their own school, and then I think they had spread to all different schools in that district, and then I think they went even further. But what they were doing was they would go to classrooms and do an instructional type of thing about autism. And I think you start there. I think it's very, very, very important to educate other children, teens, any age actually, educate other children about autism. And when you're educating children about autism, I think it becomes very important to the training that is provided to them shouldn't just be, this is autism. These are the things that define autism. I think it's important for kids to have two other kind of aspects of what autism is. One is they should learn about the cool parts of autism. So they should learn, like there's all these celebrities that have autism as well, or they say they have autism. They should learn about autistic savants that are out there, kids who have very special skills. Just because amongst the child and teen population, those types of things are very cool, right? So the other kids will realize that your child is in a classification of individuals that are cool and have these great things going for them. They think differently and they have brilliant minds and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's important to educate the child, explain to them how autism affects your brain and how individuals with autism think differently, how they see the world differently, and then give some examples of some of the cool stories that are out there. Like the people who have visual memory that is astounding, or lots of those types of stories that will help the teens understand what this is about. Then the other aspect of it, I think, is to make sure that whoever is training the classroom, the peers, really helps them develop empathy. I think it's very important. It's one of the things that we don't do enough of. Our teenagers, even younger also, like kids don't learn about being empathetic and sympathetic towards others. I mean, they might not have the diagnosis of autism, but they all will have some aspects of social anxiety. So going to them and saying, like, how do you feel when you come to, and like somebody laughs at you, or you're not good at something and someone makes fun of you for it? And give those examples and let them really feel what it is that they're doing to the other person. I think that helps. Obviously, there's always going to be kids that just don't learn, don't care, and that's probably because their upbringing and the way they're treated is with bullying, so they don't know any better. But those are some things that you can start with. And then, of course, get the school involved, right? Because you don't want your child receiving that kind of treatment.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen be the most effective is the schools that have the buddy programs, that as a result of that kind of training that you're talking about, that they have a buddy bench, where if they go sit on the buddy bench, then children that tells other children that they would like a buddy, or programs where they set aside children can volunteer to be a buddy. And because we all know this, that it's harder to bully somebody when you're traveling in a pack. So if they have friends and if people are accepting them, it makes them a little bit more bully proof. So I love all of that. But I think the friend thing is also a big deal. And that helping our children to make friends works on so many different levels, but also helps with the bullying. Parker has written in a very interesting question, Dr. Doreen. He says, "Hi, hey, Dr. Doreen and Shannon. I keep seeing posts on Instagram and social media on mycology and microdosing. As a professional of over 40 years, I wonder if mushrooms could work for recovery."
So I'll start and say, no, mushrooms cannot help someone recover. Recovery means that you are no longer exhibiting those symptoms that are associated with autism. So that is a lot of work in lots of different areas. But I will talk about, I guess, psychedelics like mushrooms, and then also even things like cannabis and stuff like that. So there are symptoms that we exhibit in autism, that we see with individuals with autism, that can be medicated with those types of medications. For example, Parker, here's an example that will work for you. A lot of individuals, a higher percentage of individuals with autism have depression. They struggle with depression when they become teenagers and older, because for a variety of reasons. I've talked about this many times. Aside from the fact that it's hard for them to understand a lot of what's going on around them, they are bullied. They just don't enjoy, they don't have the same reinforcers that we have in life. So lots of different reasons they develop depression. One of the very effective treatments for depression now are these medications like microdosing, even ketamine. And there are a lot of psychiatrists, physicians, who are using these types of treatments to help the individual. Microdosing, for instance, is used instead of antidepressants. And a lot of people find it to be quite effective. There are people who use cannabis for children who have a lot of muscle tics or muscle stereotypies. And the cannabis helps the child reduce those, or it helps children sleep better. Children who are very self-injurious tend to benefit from those medications. So we're not talking about getting rid of the diagnosis, but we are talking about, it is one of those things that is now approved for various aspects or symptoms that are associated with autism, such as depression, social anxiety, irritation, irritability. All of these types of things can be helped. And trauma. Trauma is another one where a lot of psychiatrists who use ketamine, for instance, they will do that, and then they will do kind of hypnotic type of intervention and therapy to help an individual get through what they consider to be traumatic experiences from the past. So those are all things that are completely approved across the US and can be used, but really should be used under the care of a professional and should not be used just, without that. The use of a professional, if you're doing these types of things, is absolutely vital.
Autism Journey with Elijah has written in and said, "My son is starting feeding therapy because of his pickiness and overstuffing his mouth, and then he gets sick. But now I'm seeing him throw up even when those behaviors aren't there. I'm not sure what is causing this or even if a feeding therapist can help, but this Is this common to happen to autistic children? What can a feeding therapist do to limit the throwing up, or is it something we need to discuss with his pediatrician?
Well, so good question, my friend. You're always so on top of it. I would say, first of all, you probably want to get just an evaluation, and I don't know if it'll be if the pediatrician will do this or you'll actually need to see a specialist, but whenever there's rumination or throwing up, I worry about gastrointestinal issues, especially reflux, right? I mean, it's GI reflux and acid production can interact with it, can lead to throwing up. It can also be made much worse with throwing up, because when you throw up, you're bringing up stomach acid, which can then really hurt your entire esophagus and everything. Like it can be very damaging. So it might not be a bad idea to discuss this with a pediatrician. They might actually, if your child has issues with stomach acid, which means things like bloating, gas and reflux and those types of things, they might recommend an antacid, which would just help that. Now, we do have a lot of cases where the child starts to self-induce vomiting as a habit. They just begin doing that, and it becomes something that it's kind of like a self-stimulatory behavior, right? And they start doing it, and it's very, very difficult to get rid of. I would definitely talk to a behavior analyst or speech therapist who is an expert in feeding. We did do a study years ago where it showed that chewing gum, or teaching the child to chew gum, helps reduce that behavior. But I mean, they would definitely want to regulate his eating first. They'd want to make sure he's not overstuffing and eating fast. Eating fast often what happens is there's air trapped, and you're eating on top of and pushing the air down, and then it's very easy to bring that back up because there's pressure here. So I think it would be really important, honestly, to get a medical evaluation and also to talk to a feeding specialist, because this is something that they can help you with for sure, and it's important to kind of deal with it fast.
Okay. We had another question that came in. My 13-year-old daughter perseverates by asking the same question 1,000,000 times. I have been told to ignore it, but this doesn't seem to work. She just escalates her efforts until I respond. What am I supposed to do?
So it's kind of funny because a lot of kids, not a lot, but I've had this experience. Some kids will do this. Hopefully, and I'm assuming because she's 13, I don't know her capabilities, but if it's possible, when she asks you the first time, answer it and write it down and give her the piece of paper where the answer is. And from that point forward, whenever she asks again, point to the paper and just ignore it. She will probably, over time, find another question to ask. And I want to tell you that the reason that our kids do this is because they're trying to interact and get your attention. So what you need to do is have, outside of these periods of time where she's just repetitively asking the same question, have during the course of the day, like schedule, 2-minute time intervals every hour that you're with her, where you can actually have a conversation with her and give her full attention. And you ask questions, answer hers, interact, have a fully attending interaction period with her more often during the day. Because what she's doing is she's trying to interact. And she might even be trying to share with you stuff that she's seeing or experiencing. So I don't know if her questions that she asks repeatedly are things that she watches on TV or something. Because a lot of times our kids see dialogue and they don't understand that dialogue or conversation is a back and forth question and answer and interaction that changes. they think I should keep asking the same question so I can get an answer from you, and that's dialogue. But once it's answered once, you do need to ignore it. But what I like to do is just have a visual, a written version of it, so the child knows that when you ask something once, it's only answered once. And then you move on. And then you can actually ask the child the question, and they have it written down so they can answer it too.
Yeah. I think it's such a hard thing because for so many things that we've talked about in this show today, it's that perspective taking piece, right? That we're having an experience of it as a parent. And believe me, I've been the parent where the child is asking, the child or the teen is asking a question for the millionth time. Yeah. And you feel like I'm not going to be able to survive this. And I don't want to ever make it sound like as parents, we need to take all of our feelings and put them to the side. But if we're willing to do that for even a moment and consider what is the experience that my child or my teen is having, what do I think that they want? This is that fair piece that you've always been talking about. If I think for just a second about what is it that they want in that moment, it changes for me. When somebody finally said to me, the reason why he's asking you questions is because he wants to connect with you. And I thought, well, holy moly, that's all I want is to connect with my child. And instead, the way he's connecting has been making me need to take a mental vacation. How can I flip the script here? How can I turn this into, if this is an earnest attempt for him to connect, how can I come back and meet him in this space and hopefully be able to connect with him? And so, because I think a lot of times people misunderstand and think, oh, this is where this extinction thing comes in, Dr. Granpeesheh, is that people are told, oh, it's a perseveration, ignore it. And so now the child is making the attempt, the parent attempts to ignore, the child keeps coming, and the parent is going to lose their mind over it. But I so appreciate that you, out of all these experts, are always the person going, what else is happening here? That is the person trying to connect with you. And I think if we just can be cognizant of that as parents, we can respond in a way to help make that communication flourish in a way that's healthy for both of us and fair for both of us.
Absolutely. And I guess respectful or polite for both of you. It's like sometimes when a child is asking something over and over, just tell them. And I don't know exactly what's been happening in this scenario, but we used, when children do that, we would actually say, you're only allowed to ask a question once. And then we would say, how many times did you ask? Ask me something else. Ask me something else. And we teach the child to ask different questions. And, so it's hard. It takes a while. It's a lot of lessons that go into it. But the whole purpose is they're trying to interact.
It's so interesting. There's somebody that I love in my family that does not have an autism diagnosis, but they perseverate on dates and birth stories. That their way to interact with you a couple of years ago would always be to ask what your birthday was and what, stories about your birth, or if you're a mom, the person's birth. And she would want to hear, she would ask over and over and over again. And because I'd already been through this with Jem, I would answer the question the first time, because I don't get to be around this person very much, but I would answer the first question, and then I would say, then when she would ask it again, I would say, did I just answer that question, and can you think of something else to ask me? And she would say, I can't think of anything else. And then I would say, well, you could ask me about this, you could ask me about this. And it was really interesting that I just got to be around this person again recently, and it's interesting to see over the years. And there was a moment that I thought was a real breakthrough moment recently where I was sitting with her and she said, I really want to talk to you, but I don't know what to ask you.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Shannon. I love that you just said that story. It's so important.
And to see that, it makes me tear up to see that progress for her, that she's now at a point where she understands that I can just say that. And then we had a lovely conversation. Based on that. But
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it just was one of those things that my heart goes, oh, when I realize how many times she's wanting to make that connection that maybe I I'm sure that there was a sign before that, but I was probably busy doing something and missed it before. But the fact that she can advocate for herself now and say, I really want to talk to you, but I can't think. Ooh, it was amazing, amazing.
It is amazing. And that actually, like gives me the idea that when a child is asking the same question over and over, like actually have them sit down and help them write a list of questions that are appropriate questions to ask in social situations.
Absolutely.
Because I think a lot of kids are trying to interact and they don't know how to.
Absolutely. But I got to let you go because we're about to be at the hour mark and you got to go. But I want to thank you so much for all of your time and effort and energy, and thank everybody who's watching. We're back tomorrow with another show, and don't forget a live show. And then Thursday we're doing Let's Talk Movies with Moira and Shannon, so you won't want to miss that, you guys. But please check out DoreenGranpeesheh.com. Thank you, Dr. Granpeesheh.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Shannon. Have a great day.
You too. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.